Hello everyone, welcome to day 3 in your Scrum preparation. And today we are going to discuss some very important concepts related to Scrum and Agile. So let me quickly share my screen. Okay, so in the earlier classes, we have already seen the what is waterfall model, what is agile model, the importance of SDLC, STLC, the different kind of development cycle models which we often use in the organization. And we have seen the importance of the agile way of working versus the waterfall model, the traditional one. So coming to see how Agile and Scrum are interconnected and going forward or growing, progressing towards the journey of understanding the importance of Scrum, importance of Agile, and how is it very different than what we used to do earlier. So first, let us see what are the Agile values. So we already know, compared to the traditional age-old waterfall way of working, the agile is more flexible and more adaptive kind of approach. And it has basically four values. And the first one is individuals and interactions over processes and tools. So in the traditional methods like waterfall, what we see is a lot of focus is given on the documentation or rather on the processes, how it is to be done, that what kind of tools we need to use, and there is no much of flexible options wherein we can go ahead and change anything. Everything is documented and well planned beforehand, and whatever is decided, only those things get executed. But in the agile, we see that the individuals and interactions are given a high focus even over the processes and the tools. Why? Because here we see that a lot of flexibility is given when we consider the sprints. So if we are considering the sprints, they are like shorter and concise in approach. And there's a lot of meetings or a lot of interactions are happening between the team members or in between the stakeholders basically. So that is where we see that the individuals and interactions are the prime focus in the agile. And next we have the working software over comprehensive documentation. So in earlier days, we used to see that a lot of documentation is done and the agreements are signed. There used to be some kind of memorandum of understanding, the MOUs, which used to be signed, and we had to abide by that. Even now, there are documents and MOUs, but only on the surface level on the business side. But when it comes to the actual execution of the projects, we see that the working software is the prime importance. Suppose if we are considering a particular sprint and we need to develop a kind of software. So what we go ahead and do is we build some stories. In that we consider building a small chunk of the project version. Like if we are trying to develop a banking software, and in that we have a small chunk, like retrieving the data from the database. For example, there is a huge database in the banking system, and if you have to pick a small the data, like if a customer is coming and asking you for some details about their accounts, and if the bank employee is required to process that particular information, he or she is supposed to use the software and try to pull in the data from the database. So this is a kind of, one of the small thing which we're going to develop. This is just for an example. And if we are considering it as a story in particular sprint. So the expectation from the end user is they're able to fetch the data and view the account details. So the working software at the end of the sprint is this requirement being accomplished. So we are able to see in our local systems what is being developed. And if we are implementing this in the client system, the client will be able to use this as well. So even though it is like a smaller part from the entire project, it has its own kind of value. So the working software is the main focus always. Delivering the working software is the main focus or the aim of the agile as compared to the comprehensive documentation we used to do earlier. Then customer collaboration. over contract negotiation. Earlier, it used to be, as I said before, it's only used to be the contract and signing of it, a lot of documents being processed and keeping it, a very complex kind of approach. But for now, the communication is very clear. It's like two-way communication. We are trying to develop something and show them if what we are doing is correct. We are trying to take some feedback and try to develop based on it. So the customer collaboration is main focus as compared to the contract negotiation. Responding to change over following the plan. So in the traditional approach, we always just follow a plan. Everything is given in hand. We just see to it and we execute it. Even now, some projects are using it. Some kind of projects do require that kind of approach. But if we are considering the agile values, responding to change is the focus as compared to follow the plan. Suppose if there is some requirements which come midway from the business and a PO, the product owner says that this is very important and this has to be accommodated at this point of time. Suppose, for example, we are working on a project B and they have some requirement which is similar to the project B, but they need that enhancement during these 15 days itself on a working software which is already implemented in the earlier version in the organization. Suppose, okay, if there's a plan, if there's a project A and there's a project B, like suppose we have developed a website for a particular client and we are developing the second one. If the first one and the second one is more similar and they have some requirement on the first one which has come into place, which is very, very same to whatever we are developing right now. And I feel because of, okay, if at all, if the first project A is version 1 and the project B is version 1.1, so the whatever was delivered in the version 1 requires some kind of changes immediately, which can be accommodated in the version 1.1. So at that point of time, if this requirement is immediate when the business tells it to the product owner and he gets it to the team. So what we need is that as a team, we need to respond to the change. We need to accommodate this request and we need to deliver this. This is perfectly fine. But if we are following a plan like the traditional approach, then there's no going back and checking that if we can accommodate this. We only focus on delivering whatever we are trying to work upon, and there's no changes or no kind of flexibility option provided over there. So these are like very clear. If you see individuals and interactions over process and tools, working software over comprehensive documentation, customer collaboration over contract negotiation, and responding to change over following a plan. Now, coming to the very important question, what is Scrum? So we already know that the agile is a way of working and we have something in the core called as a scrum. We often refer to as scrum team, scrum master. Everywhere scrum has become a very a vivid kind of approach. Everybody wants scrum in their organization. They want to think in the agile way. But understanding at the core what is scrum becomes very important. And what the Scrum is, it's again a way of working and it helps the team work together. So when we say it helps the team work together, that means that the entire team is trying to come into a common understanding every single day, trying to interact with each other in order to understand if they're doing the work correctly in the right direction. And as a team, they're gonna develop something with a single mindset. It's not like if there are around 10 people team, all the 10 people are thinking in 10 different ways. The guidelines are very clear and all the 10 people are coming and trying to develop the same thing with the same thought process. Deliver small pieces of work quickly. As I said, in the agile values, we are always focusing on delivering the valuable software during every particular sprint. So the big projects are always divided into smaller chunks. And those small pieces of work are delivered very quickly within the sprints, and we often get the feedback as to what we have developed is correct, or is there any changes needed, or is there anything else which we need to accommodate, or are we in the right understanding that whatever is expected is what is delivered, or if there is any disparity between that, and improve continuously because we are delivering, we are getting the feedback and trying to accommodate all that is requested. definitely we are improving continuously. So when we see the difference between the Scrum and the Agile, Agile is a mindset or the way of thinking. If you can see in the Scrum, what I said, it's a way of working. So the Agile is a way of thinking, and if we practically get it into action, then that is a Scrum. It is a way of working. And Scrum is a methodology to follow the agile. So it's very clear. You think in your mind, we have to think the agile way, we have to work the agile way. But when we get these things into the action, then that is nothing but the Scrum. And Scrum is like, as said earlier, to help the team work together, deliver the pieces more quickly, get the feedback, and improve continuously. So this minor difference between the agile and Scrum is very important because even though you know what is agile or how this organization is using it in the firm, or what is a way of agile way of thinking or agile way of developing, if you do not know how to conduct the scrum ceremonies or how to conduct the activities in the scrum, then you are not into the scrum, you are just thinking and you are not acting. So this fine line of difference is very important. Now, to understand in a more extensive way of what is agile. So, agile is a way of working, or rather, a way of thinking, where Scrum is a way of working, where you build things step by step, get quick feedback, and keep improving instead of one-time development. This is nothing but all that I've explained in the first slide, wherein I was showing the difference between the traditional and the new way of thinking. For example, waterfall, a way to build a car for the child, and result child might like or don't like a car. Suppose if we are building a car for a child, if we are working in a waterfall way, we as a parent or anybody for that matter, a teacher, go ahead and build the car and just give it as a gift to the child without even asking what the child wants. Or rather, okay, I would ask a child, what kind of car do you want? He would say, okay, I need a red color car, which is like, very big, or okay, very big, and it looks fabulous. So his kind of fabulous is not actually specified in the way the car is supposed to be designed. We do not know how the windows should be placed, how long the car should be. What is in his mind is not portrayed here. So we are building a car based on what we are thinking. So when I finally deliver that car to the child, I'm not sure if he would like it, if he would not like it, or what is running in his mind. If we are taking the approach in the agile way, it involves the child in building the car along with us. Like, we have a weekly iteration of building the parts. We build all the parts separately. The doors are built separately. The windows attachments are built separately. Then the car kind of interiors are built separately. Adding the colors and inside and outside is done separately and integrating all the parts together. And while doing all of it, the child's inputs are taken and we are delivering the car as per expectation of the child. And finally, we are 100% sure that the child is going to like this particular car because it is as per his specifications and he has designed it in the way of thinking. We have only built it in the way of working. Now coming to the 353 model of the Scrum. The Scrum basically has the 353 model, which is very important, and that is how all the Scrum events work. If we would consider 353, it's nothing else other than for the three roles, five events, and three artifacts. So, what are the three roles in the Scrum? We have a product owner, we have a Scrum master, and we have a development team. So when we consider the product owner, he decides what needs to be built. To be honest, all the requirements are got from the business in the organization. So mainly the product owner is someone who will own the product. He knows what is to be delivered. He's the first point of contact in between the service provider or the person who is actually taking the details in order to deliver it to the client and who gets that requirement to the particular team. So if we are a Scrum team, we have one product owner. Some of the organizations will have one business analyst. We have one scrum master. Then we have the developers and the QA individuals. So when we consider the product owner, he is like playing a very crucial role of getting the requirements properly with the proper acceptance criteria or the proper kind of user stories which are to be built. So on a outer surface, or if you would consider on a not like very intrinsic way, but he will get the requirements and he'll just give the vague way of writing the user stories as to what is the requirement. He does not know what kind of coding or the complexities are there in being building this product, but he knows what are the requirements and what are the things which are to be developed. So he'll get the the details what are to be developed. Then comes the Scrum Master. Scrum Master helps the team follow the Scrum and remove the problems. The all the Scrum teams, the main role is played by the Scrum Master, because the Scrum Master is a person who actually facilitates all of the activities happening within the Scrum teams. And they do have constant negotiations or constant kind of interactions with multiple stakeholders in order to get these things done. So it's like a single point of contact across the teams or across the stakeholders who can approach the Scrum Master to understand what is being developed or what additional help they need from the teams who are working under the Scrum. And the development team. Now, in the new Scrum Guide, we consider like the developers and the QA individuals, or they all put together are considered as a development team. They are not seen as separate, even though their tasks are different. The developers does the developing and the QA does the testing. But even then, the development team is a team considered developers plus the QA individuals put together. People who actually do the work, build, design, and test. So these are the three roles. Then we have the 5 events in the Scrum. So these events are very, very important. As a Scrum Master, we need to understand all these 5, because it's like everyday bread and butter of the Scrum Master, to be honest, because we are constantly on focus on continue. This is our day-to-day job basically. Like as you get up, wake up and do all your daily duties, you need to go ahead and go to your work and do these daily duties. It's like a BAU, the business continuity process, which we need to follow as a Scrum Master. So the 5 events are the sprint planning, daily Scrum or the daily stand-up, sprint review, and sprint retrospective. So basically, what is sprint? So usually what happens is the sprint can be anything, like what we decide upon the time period in order to develop the requirements which is given. As per the Scrum guide, if you would see, the sprint can be anywhere between 1 week sprint to 4 week sprint, and not lesser than that or not more than that. Usually, traditionally, or usually in most of the organizations, we follow a 10-day sprint, that is 2 weeks. So, one sprint will be of a time period of 2 weeks with 10 working days. But again, it is Scrum. So, if there are some requirements, like for example, if there is a lot of vacations planned across the team, or it's like regional holidays, a lot many days are coming in between, then the team can sit and decide and try to understand that okay, the sprint can be expanded for more number of days. So, if at all within the 2 week sprint of 10 working days, if we have around like 4 or 5 days of vacations, which is a public holiday through the nation, then we are getting only 5 days of work and we are not seeing any value being added. So additionally, we could consider one more week included. So it looks like a 3 week sprint, but again, it's only like 10 working days, not the 15 working days, because the 5 days are going in the vacations. So it's completely fine. It is dependent on the team and the the project requirements. What should be the length of the sprint? But ideally, in our organization or any organizations, they do follow 2 week sprint with 10 working days. So sprint planning. So sprint planning is one of the very important aspect before starting of the sprint. So here in sprint planning, there are two things like it could be like sprint pre-planning and the sprint planning. And pre-planning is a kind of activity which is not done in all the organization, but few of the organizations do follow the practice of the sprint pre-planning. That is because the requirements will be clear if we have a pre-planning phase. So basically, what happens in the pre-planning is the product owner explains, the user stories on the board, on the Jira or the ADO board. He goes ahead and explains to the team what are the requirements to be developed during this sprint. This is during the pre-planning. So there will be the user stories, the acceptance criteria are defined, and the team needs to, the team, when I say the developers and the QA individuals must try to, understand what is the requirement through those stories. And if there are any, if there are any doubts or if they are not trying to understand or if they're not getting what is to be developed, those doubts can be clarified with the PO at that point of time. Usually in the pre-planning, we only see on the surface level what are the requirements which is coming to the sprint. These can be new or it can be from the backlog. Usually we'll have a backlog. Suppose something is not completed in the previous sprint, that gets carried forward to the next sprint. So for those kind of stories, we need not have to go ahead and revisit it because it's already planned in the previous sprint and because of some reasons could not be completed, so got pushed into the next sprint. But if something new has got added into that sprint, then that is where the requirements are to be clear for the developers and the QA and for all others in the team. So this is done during the sprint pre-planning. And for the sprint planning, what we do is, first of all, we go ahead and see the capacity of the team. Suppose if there is a team of 10 members, we have a PO, we have a BA, we have a Scrum Master. So out of 10, the 3 individuals are not counted as the development team and we will not consider their capacity on the board. The capacity which is considered on the board is only related to the actual people who develop the particular product or the particular software. So it will be like those 7 people. Out of 7, if there are like 4 developers and 3 QA individuals, then those 7 people capacity has to be updated on the board. So what is this capacity? Like if we are considering a sprint of 10 days, then for each day, if we are considering 9 working hours, like if you're considering from 9 to 6, is your day of, I mean, everyday work hours. Then 9 to 6 is 9 hours. In that 9 hours, we consider like 1 hour of lunch break. So we have 8 hours left. In that 8 hours, usually we give a space of 2 hours for all the calls. They would be having their kind of a lot of calls, like we might be having some planning calls, retro calls, review calls, or some requirement calls between the PO and the BM. Any other tasks of the development team, those 2 hours are given, and remaining 6 hours in the 9 hours is considered as a capacity for one single day. This is a general practice. So if we have 4 developers and 3 QA individuals, for every individual, for every day, 6 hours is considered. So if we are considering a 10-day sprint, for every individual, 6 hours per day into 10 days. So it is like 60 hours per individual. So that is the capacity of that individual for that particular sprint. 60 hours per individual. So if you would consider it for 7 people, so it would be like 60 into 7. So it's 6 5 40 to 420 hours. So even in that 420 hours, we do not consider the entire 420 hours as fully given to that particular sprint, usually we have something called as the buffer capacity. So if you are considering 420 hours as 100%, in that we consider only 85%. And the rest 15% we consider it as a buffer. So buffer is given because sometimes what happens is like usually if there are some emergencies, or if somebody goes on a sick leave, unplanned leaves, or even if it could be a planned leave, 1 or 2 days here and there. So we have to accommodate all of these things in the organization. So we consider 15% as the buffer space. So if we are considering the 15% as buffer space, it would be somewhere around like 65, roughly like 65 to 70 hours. So in that, for 420 hours, if you reduce 70 hours, it comes approximately up to 350 to 355 hours during that sprint. So that would be the actual, capacity, what we consider. So during the sprint planning, calculating this capacity becomes very, very important in the first place. Only once we calculate the capacity, we actually know how much of hours is available during that particular sprint during the development happens. So we have this estimations with us. In that 355 hours, how much of the work can be completed should be focused. So before the planning call or maybe during the pre-planning, the development team is advised to, in order to review the stories once the call gets over, and they need to take some time and they need to add the estimations. When we say ask estimations, they have a user story, they need to add their tasks. The developers have to add the developers task. The QA individuals are supposed to add the testing tasks, and they need to estimate, okay, this task requires these many number of hours to complete. So once they have added these tasks, and they have added the number of hours, how much it is required to complete these tasks. Now we know that, okay, we have the user stories in hand, the tasks are added, the estimations are added. Suppose a particular developer has not taken any leave, so he is expected to have around like 6 hours per day into 10 days, 60 hours, and again leaving all the buffer and all that. If he has around like at least 52 hours of work in his bag for the 10 days of sprint, and if he has estimated certain things with the tasks, and if we see that the estimation shows that he has around 65 hours of work, so there is a mismatch. His availability of the time is only 52 hours, but his tasks are showing that he has 65 hours of work. So this is not possible. We will not consider this, maybe because we won't be able to achieve it. Sprint planning is mainly done in order to commit that we will be able to complete it. So we may go ahead and revise the user stories, and we may have to see the priorities of the stories, and we will remove the story which has a least priority, or we will discuss with the PO and the BA, like, which of the user story which can be like, adjusted and move to the next sprint, so that the developer can complete the committed works within the sprint. So these kind of discussions happen during the planning. The first thing is the capacity planning which happens, and then we will go ahead and see the task estimations, and if they have estimated it correctly, and yeah, post that we come to a conclusion, and we commit to the works that we should be able to complete these many number of stories in these many number of days. So there are some other ways of calculating the number of user stories which should be included on the board. That is the average velocity. I'll come to that maybe in the future classes when we go in depth about the stories or the acceptance criteria and other things. And the next step in the 5 events is the daily scrum or the daily stand-up. So daily scrum or the daily stand-up is very important meeting which happens every single day. This is conducted by the scrum master. This should be for this should actually be only for 10 minutes every day. That is the proper practice. But in the organization, we often see that it can go up to 15 minutes or 20 minutes. And there are some scrum masters in some organizations who actually, drag it to 30 minutes, 40 minutes, etc. This is not the right approach at all. 10 minutes, maximum 15 minutes, in case if there are some doubts or anything for that matter. So anything beyond this timeline, if there is some requirement, it should be the separate kind of meetings which has to be held over the period of the day. So during the daily scrum, what happens is the team come into the sync over a call, and the scrum master reviews the board for the stories every single day in order to understand what was, what happened the previous day, how's the progress, are there any impediments or are there any blockers from any particular teams or stakeholders. If there are any blockers, the scrum master has to identify how these blocks can be just removed so that the developers can easily progress and complete their tasks. The next event is a sprint review. The sprint review happens at the end of the sprint, and this is basically to understand what is that we had committed and have we completed the tasks correctly. I mean, during the review, we actually try to understand and take the feedback from the business that whatever was expected, have we achieved it correctly? So, this sprint review calls are one of the very important aspects because review is like, people and the stakeholders will be very keen in order to see, a small working software, which is like a win, which we have achieved as a period of, as a team over the period of the sprint, that we have done something, and this showcasing is done by the PO and the developers or any stakeholders from the team who is required to present that to the required teams. And sprint retrospective. Sprint retrospective also happens after the particular sprint ends. And over here, we would join over a call, and we will try to understand how did the sprint go? Did we actually work upon the things what we had planned for in the way we had planned for? What were the challenges which were faced? How we can improvise it further? Is there something which we need to get into the team or into the process which can help the team work better? So these kind of discussions happens during the retrospective call. So if we need to consider about the timelines, as a sprint, I said usually it's a 2 week sprint with 10 working days. Sprint planning call is mostly like 1 hour call, and this happens for one before the sprint. So if we are considering a 2 week sprint, then it happens 2 times a month. So it happens before the sprint starts. If we are considering a sprint pre-planning call, that can also be for 1 hour, and sprint planning call is also for the 1 hour. 1 hour is usually the time which is needed. And if at all, if the requirements are very less or more, it can be adjusted. But the general practice is 1 hour. Daily scrum or stand-up is for 10 minutes, maximum 15 minutes. Sprint review call is for 1 hour. Usually it's 1 hour, and if there is something very a lot more to be discussed, it can be extended for some more time. But it's generally for 1 hour. Again, sprint retrospective call is also for 1 hour for the 15-day sprint. Basically, for the 2 week sprint, these are the timelines which we usually follow. And then in the Scrum, the three roles, five events, and last one is the three artifacts. The three artifacts comprises of the product backlog, sprint backlog, and the increment. So when we consider the product backlog, it is a list of work or features to be done. So this product backlog, if we would see, it's like an entire product. Like when we are considering the full project, we have a particular product backlog, or maybe like if we are considering not only this particular product, not only this particular project, there can be multiple projects for one single product, and we have a product backlog which is maintained. Suppose, okay, if organization is building something during the period of a particular month like January, and there was halt in that project for February and March, because it was some a new team which was set up, and the team was supposed to work on a different project or product altogether because of the requirements and the business needs. And finally, we have got some additional resources, so they have got back into the first project in order to continue with the working. At that point of time, Now, if we are considering the product backlog, you can see that you are bringing in the items which was halted during the month of Jan, and you are bringing it into the production in the month of March. So there's a backlog which is maintained, the product backlog from wherein you take the requirements and put to the board over here. The sprint backlog. The sprint backlog is a list of items chosen for the current sprint. So the sprint backlog is basically like, okay, if you're in sprint 6, you have completed 5 sprints earlier, and currently you're planning for the sprint 6, and you're planning to take up the new tasks into the sprint 6. But you also see that there are some requirements which are not actually completed in the sprint 5 for any particular reason it may be, and you're pulling in the data or the stories in order to get them completed during this sprint. So if you're bringing the data from the previous sprint item, then that becomes a sprint backlog. So here we are committing, we are getting something from the sprint backlog, and we are committing to complete it during this particular sprint. And the increment, working output created in the sprint. So during the review call, whatever we try to check as to what we have developed, and we try to showcase this to the design teams and the stakeholders what we have developed, the working software. That is the main focus of the sprint or the kind of agile or the Scrum way of working, what we are delivering continuously over the end of the sprint. So this is the increment. Working software created in the sprint is the increment. So the Scrum 3 roles, 5 events, and 3 artifacts. This all combined is nothing but the Scrum. There are a lot of activities which happens. These are the basic things which I've explained over here. But when we work in the organization, there will be like lots of challenges in order to achieve this. It all looks like very simple when we would consider the 3 roles, 5 events, and 3 artifacts. But if the Scrum is taught properly, as a Scrum Master, if we are able to coach our teams properly, maybe related to the Scrum or Agile, and if everybody starts thinking in the same line, and if they are trying to be, focused on the delivery of the software rather than focusing on anything else, at that point, what happens is we see some miracles happen. Here, all the 10 people are not thinking in 10 different ways, but they're thinking in one direction in order to deliver the software which is required. So we see magics happen, and things move very smooth as compared to the traditional or other ways of working. So this is all I had for today. Let's try to connect during the uh, next modules going forward. Thank you all.